I had my first Bigfoot encounter when I was at the age of 12. It was very unexpected. You know, I knew some things were taking place down in the woods that was different because this was my favorite fishing hole as a kid, and it was my favorite squirrel hunting place where I killed a lot of squirrels. I mean, they were my go-to places. So prior to running into that first experience, you know, even when I was trapping during, because my experience happened in the spring, but in the fall, I started noticing because I've got this trap bait that my grandpa taught me how to make. And basically, you just catch a bunch of perch, you throw them off in the mason jar, put the lid on it, bury it, wait till the fall. You know, you do that in spring, wait till the fall. When you pull this stuff out, it is rank, real rank. But being in a glass jar, you know, I'd only want to carry them to the woods once because I didn't want to break the jar and get that stuff on me because it stunk to high heaven. So what I'd do is along my trap line, I would put, you know, maybe in a hollow log or up in a fork of a tree, I would put my trap bait up there, you know, and I noticed that some of my trap bait started disappearing and some of my traps would have like a stick stuck in it, which you know, kept me from catching animals. But I noticed something about the jars, and I even took them to my dad, you know, because my dad had me, you know, thinking that there was a bear there. But in south central Arkansas back then, there wasn't no bears because this was like 1974, 75, somewhere right around in there. You know, I was in 12 years old and in grade school, fixing to go into high school. And so I took him the jars, and what the jars were, because he said it was a bear, you know, but the jars were pried off. There wasn't no teeth marks or anything like that. Every once in a while you'd see the twist on the lid on the mason jars. I might find those, and they'd be, you know, yanked in half, you know, so it wasn't nothing unscrewing it. It would just take it and just pop the top off and bend the rim that went around there. Sometimes I wouldn't find a jar, sometimes I would. You know, I was telling my dad, I said, look, there ain't no teeth marks in this because a bear can't grab it and do it like that, you know, but something with opposable thumbs can do it. And there wasn't no presence of teeth marks. And I told him, I said, I don't know what's going on down there because I heard whoops, you know, hollers, screams, tree knocks. Of course, back then I didn't have the slightest idea what that was. And I've been hunting this area for a couple of years. As a kid, like I said, it was my go-to spot. So I noticed little things like that kept happening. You know, I'd noticed in areas that I fished, there would be fish there, but it looked like you would see nothing but the head. It was like something was catching them and just, because you could see the roundness of teeth on these fish, and there wouldn't be nothing but the head and a little bit of meat, and it'd be tossed to the side, and you might find, you know, 10 or 12, all of them with the same marks, you know. So that was hard for a 12-year-old to wrap his mind around it, you know. There's been time I'd be down there and that thing would scream and it you know, just send shivers down your spine. You start backing out of the woods because you don't know I didn't know what it was, you know. Nowadays, you know, I know exactly what it is, you know, after chasing after these suckers for over 50 years. You know, it all started with that first encounter. You know, that thing was screaming in the woods, like I was saying, and, you know, it just sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't, you know, fathom what it was just yet. I couldn't put the pieces together, so to speak, like I can now. You know, now I can go in the woods and I can tell where, you know, where things are happening, what to look for, what to listen for, and whatnot, you know, and it's a whole lot easier to be able to get myself into a hot spot now than it was back then. But it all started when I was 12 years old. And the morning that this encounter happened, I got up early. Dad had to work on a Saturday, so I got up early with him and got, you know, ate breakfast with him, and then I grabbed my single shot 22, my little tackle box, and my Zebco 33 reel and rod. I wish I still had that, but because it was a steel reel and rod, you know, it wasn't a fiberglass like you got now. And I remember going to the back porch, and on the back porch we had a big freezer, and we killed hogs every year. and we would process them ourselves. So we'd cook that fat down and made lard for the family to cook with and stuff. But we also had the cracklings and the hog skins and stuff. So I grabbed a couple of biscuits and stuck it in my I was wearing a hoodie, and then I grabbed a whole bunch of hog skins and tucked them in this little pouch that I had in front of me, and I set sail. Now you had to go across, if you left the house, you had to go across this big long field. And I remember going across that big field, there was something that was just uneasy with me that morning that I'd never felt, you know, and I'm kind of like, I'm thinking to myself going across this field as a 12-year-old boy, something's not right. The woods don't feel right. The woods don't sound right. It was just kind of eerie, and it was foggy that morning. But I just kept going, got all the way over to the fence, the back fence where it hit the woods. And I remember stopping there and got to thinking, I was like, man, it sure is quiet this morning. I remember saying that to myself. I went ahead and crawled through the barbed wire fence. Of course, it was a big pine thicket with some hardwoods in it. So with the pine needles on the ground, you could slip through the woods real easy. So I went stealth mode and I started slipping through there. I got about halfway in there, and I just kind of stopped, and I was kind of like, I got a real uneasy feeling. And so I sat there by that tree, and I opened up a couple of cracklings and threw them up in that one of those biscuits and ate that biscuit there, just kind of trying to feel things out. So I kept going, but 2 weeks earlier, there was my grandpa called them cyclones, but it was a tornado that come through there. So it knocked down a bunch of trees. Usually I'd walk straight to that area, but when I got to that area, which comes up kind of like on a hill, an embankment, and it has this creek that's spring fed that runs in the back of the Ouachita River in this bayou back here that would come up when they let the water out every afternoon. The water would rise back in there, and that where that spring water hit right there in the bayou there at the Ouachita River. That, man, you catch them big old hand-sized perch. I mean, the big rascals you used to be able to catch like that. Big old sun perch and stuff like that, man, them were good eating, And I provided meat and fish, for our house, because we were real poor. And so when I got to my area, that big tree had fell over across the creek. So I couldn't just walk down the creek bed to get to it. So I had to come up out of the creek. And when I started walking around the tops of the trees and come over here, and I started coming up that hill, and I'm just kind of looking, I've got my tackle box, my 22, and I'm looking around trying to figure out what is not right going on here, because I've never experienced the woods being that quiet. I mean, you could have heard a pin drop. And when I come up that edge, I'm just kind of looking around. I turn around, and there he is, and I'm like, as a little kid, but he did the same thing. He looks at me and his mouth opens. It was kind of like a shock to both of us, is what I felt. And he looked at me and I looked at, of course, it seemed like forever. It's kind of like, and what I felt was, it's kind of like being in a combat situation where that tunnel vision comes in and that you're hearing, it kind of messes with your mind when that adrenaline just hits so far and you get tunnel vision, you focus in on what the threat is. And he was a threat to me. I've never seen a monster in the woods before. I've deer hunted, I've coon hunted at night. I'd go out there with my 22 and my old dogs, my Jake and Amos. I'd take them out, spend all night in the woods and never know what was going on. But that day, whew, man, it was crazy. It was crazy. But I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, and I could see his teeth. I couldn't really see his from about right up here up because of the hair that hung down. I could tell his eyes were black, but I couldn't really see them real good. And he had like big buck teeth, horse teeth. You know how horse teeth is all clean here and it's all brown up around the gum area and stuff like that. And he was clacking his teeth like that at me, and it seemed like forever. Me and this critter sitting there looking at each other, and he's standing in about knee-deep water. So I would take it he was probably between 7 and 8 feet tall, and he's standing there and he's looking at me and I'm looking at him, and then all of a sudden he screams, whoa, and it was kind of like it's kind of like the old cartoons, you know, when something screams at something, their hair's all, you know, going behind them and stuff like that. When that sound hit my body, it vibrated everything within me. I mean, my lungs were vibrating, my heart was vibrating, everything, and kind of made me sick to my stomach. And of course, being a 12-year-old kid, you know, everything cut loose then. You know, I stood there, wet my britches, looking at this thing. Now, everything in my mind, Miguel, is telling me to run. When I saw him, my mind was telling me exit stage left, but my feet would not be, my feet wouldn't listen to what my mind's saying. My mind's saying, get the heck out of here. That's a monster. Rock and roll, go on, you know, get back to the house as quick as you can. But my feet, I was just paralyzed with fear. And when he screamed, you know, I wet my britches, down it went, you know. And then he took his hand back like this, and he did like that. And he's standing in knee-deep water, so his hands were actually lower than his knees. And he had kind of like a stumped over, what's the word called? Way his body was, posture. Posture is the word I'm looking for. And he took his hand like this, and he scooped up a bunch of water in one motion and slung it at me. When he did that and that water hit my face, it was like everything come back into focus, and that's when I turned tail and ran. You know, it didn't matter. You know, I jumped through the barbed wire fence. When I was running through the woods, I was all cut up by briars and stuff because I didn't go around, didn't stalk or anything like that. All I wanted to do is get the heck out of them woods and get back to the house. And I remember running across that field as fast as I could, and rolling up. When I got to the house, rolling up, I was just totally exhausted. Now I dropped my tackle box and my fishing pole. I still had the 22 in my hand, but I never remembered I had a gun in my hand. Of course, it wouldn't have done any good on something like that. And when I hit the ground, Grandpa was coming in from milking a cow that morning. And he's like, boy, what's wrong with you? And I said, there's a monster down in them woods, Grandpa. He said, I told you, boy, that was a haint down there. That's what he called him, because he had his encounter in Idaho when he was a tree topper as a young man. And somebody shot one of these critters. And later on that night, there was 3 or 4 of them, 5 of them come through camp and just totally destroyed their camp. And the only one that got beat up or bruised up didn't kill him, but the guy that took the shot. Now, how them suckers know where he was at in that camp, not unless they were just watching everything, but they ended up hurting him. They threw him up against a tree, but it didn't kill him. I mean, it messed him up, but it didn't kill him. But they destroyed the camp, as my grandpa called him, a haint, because of his Bigfoot stories. And he said, boy, I told you it was a haint. I told you not to go down there. You know, and I would tell my dad, you know, and he said, I was like, I'm hearing all these noises down there, some hooping and hollering and stuff. I said, it sounds like a monkey. And he said, no, son, that's just a bear, just a bear. But before this happened, I took Dad down there when I found some prints. These prints were probably about this long, but the interesting thing about it, they only had 3 toes on the print. And when I showed Dad them prints, you know, Dad was like, yeah, son, that's not a bear. You need to stay out of these woods, you know. But that was my favorite fishing hole. That was my best squirrel spot, and spring squirrel season was on, you know. And so he told me not to go back down there. So when I'd leave the house, I'd go, you know, north and then turn around, hit the river, and come on back and go back to that spot. And that's where I would either fish or hunt, you know. And that was the first time I'd ever seen a Sasquatch. Now this particular Squatch, and I call it a Sasquatch, and it may not have been a Sasquatch. I've seen a lot of these critters, and they're kind of like humans, you know. Me and you don't look alike at all, but we still have arms, we still have feet, we have ears, we have a nose, eyes, mouth. We're all the same in a bunch of different figures. This thing looked like a feral human. It looked like he was an old man. Had a nose like ours, but extremely large, had extremely buck teeth. You know, if it was a Neanderthal man or something like that, I don't know. Now, I've seen some that look more apish-like, you know, but the first one I saw, that was a human with long hair. And he had about 6 inches long hair all over his body, and a lot of it was matted up with like mud and had like, tree leaves all in it and stuff like that. But he looked human. It wasn't what I've seen here of late. I mean, this guy looked like human. His face that I could see down here was a grayish top color, kind of like the color of your truck over there, that new truck you got. It was grayish. It wasn't white like ours, or it's not, black like an African American or anything like that. It was a grayish color tone to his skin. And I've seen some videos of Sasquatch that look like what I saw when I was a kid, and the ones I saw, have a facial, I think there's a one out there where he goes through some police tape and throws a log over at the camera and stuff like that. That's more or less what I saw. But this one he was tall and he was muscular, but he wasn't real huge. He wasn't big, monstrous. He was more thin, slimline, but he still had that strong muscle tone to him and big shoulders and stuff like that. And I've seen some that are just, astronomical. They should be playing in the NFL. They wouldn't need no defense. That could be the defense. These suckers are huge. But this one was slimline. It was different than any other, and I haven't seen another critter like that since that one there. That's the only one I've seen that looks so human-like. Look like me or you, except 7, 8 foot tall with horse teeth and hair all over it. So that changed everything for me. I didn't go in the woods at night. I instantly became scared of the dark. And it wasn't that I was scared of the dark, but I knew now what was in the dark, and start hearing, like when I was out coon hunting when I was a kid, I would hear this. I would hear tree knocks and stuff like that. Now I'm starting to put all the pieces together. And there was a time that it was me, my dad, my older brother, and my Uncle Bud. We were out there coon hunting, or running the dogs is what we were doing. And my uncle went with us because he had a couple of dogs he wanted to run. Usually we'd go out there and get them on a coyote or something like that. And just to hear them run, that was my dad. He just loved hearing them dogs run. And there was something that hit in them woods so loud that it hurt my eardrums. I mean, and I can't tell you what it was, but it was loud, and it was like it hit, how you get around somebody that has a big bass deal in their truck, music, and that bass will kind of hit you in the chest. That's what it sounded like. We all felt that. And the dogs got boogered up. And I remember this one chip of my Uncle Bud's come running back at him and hit him. And she was looking back over her shoulder. And it hit him in the leg and almost broke his leg. We had to end up taking him to the hospital the next day to have his leg checked out. I don't know what that noise was, but it was so powerful, and it boogered the dogs up. Dogs didn't want to hunt after that. They were done. They were ready to go in the truck. Kind of like my Jip last weekend when I was down in Fout. She didn't want to get out of the truck, and I'll probably get into that a little bit later. But after that, that changed my life. I became scared of the dark. You couldn't throw me outside. I would, man. And if you did get me outside, buddy, I'm coming through a window. It doesn't matter. I'm getting back in the house where it's light. So when the sun went down, my butt was in the house until I was 18 years old. And I started overcoming my fear of what was in the dark. Because I got to thinking, this thing, even though it scared the fire out of me and made me wet my britches, it didn't hurt me. It didn't attack me. It didn't chase me. And I only saw it that once. And that was it. I'd love to have got a picture of it, but if I took Dad's, back then, the only camera we had was one of them Polaroids. You take a picture and it comes out the end, you wait for it to develop. And if I took that down there squirrel hunting, Daddy'd tear my butt up. We didn't know about casting prints or anything like that, but it just kept happening, over my lifespan. We'd be over here hunting in Arkansas or down here hunting in Arkansas, or if I was hunting out in New Mexico, it doesn't matter. where I was at, you know, some people say they tag people. I really believe that because these critters always show up. You know, I've been a part of a lease with my older brother and my couple of my cousins and stuff. They've been hunting down there in them woods forever and ain't never saw not near one thing. But when I started going down there, I started seeing, I started hearing, and I'm like, well, how come, you know, and I would talk to my brother about it a little bit because my older brother, he was kind of skeptical at first. I think his eyes are open now. I know my younger brother, he comes down there a lot to just kind of jack around, get on his four-wheeler, ride around and stuff like that, you know, and he believes, you know, but it amazes me that how, you know, because you got a lot of people that say, well, I ain't never saw a Bigfoot and I've been in the woods all my life, you know, but you've never paid attention, you know, because when we step into the woods, we're in their yard, we're in their territory, we're in their living room, you know, and it's not on our terms, it's on their terms. If they want you to see them, they'll let you see them. If they don't, you'll never see them. And I tell people all the time, well, I ain't never saw no Bigfoot. Well, I promise you, if you've spent any time in the woods, they've seen you. You might not have seen them, but I guarantee you, they have seen you, you know. And so I kept having these small little encounters, you know, never a visual, but just small encounters that you know, I contributed to when I saw that first critter. And when I got in on the lease down in south central Arkansas, that's when it really started really picking up. And I, you know, it didn't matter where I went. I've seen these things. And there's a lot of stuff I can't share with you because it'd get me on like a black site somewhere. So maybe we'll talk about a little bit of that off camera and remind me and I'll tell you a few stories. But when I got in there on that hunting lease, the first encounter I had, because I heard whoops, I heard tree knocks constantly down there. And I asked my brother, I said, you know, you setting up and you stand, do you ever hear like wood hitting wood? He's like, yeah, I hear that all the time. What is that? I said, it's a Sasquatch. And he's like, oh boy, you know, he didn't believe me, but he's a believer now. But when I set up my first deer stand, I set up a big old tire stand on a logging road here, and then I cut a path through here, and then I had another path that went down this way. And I hunted off this stand, killed some good bucks, you know, but I put a tree stand, a lean up, went up about 25 foot in the air, this lean up was. And I went down there. Usually what I do is I like getting in the stand about an hour before daylight. You know, that way I can get in there, get settled, you know, and as soon as, you know, right in the morning times, usually the deer will be more on the move, more to come into a feeder, because you can feed in Arkansas. And so I had a big corn feeder sitting there, a big 55-gallon drum, and I put this on longer legs higher up in the air, and it was about 8 foot tall at the top, to where the hogs, we have a lot of hogs down there, and them hogs, they'll get your feeder, they'll tear it all to pieces trying to get that corn out of there. And so, and actually this feeder, they knocked it over once, and I had to, you know, put my legs down, and I took those T-posts and drove in there and then wrapped the webbing around there to, you know, anchor it down to the ground. They never turned it over after that. But I set it high where the hogs wouldn't mess with it. And I left that morning, so when we get my stand, it was bow season, so all I had on me was my bow, and I had my Glock on my side. And I always park my four-wheeler here, and then I'd walk about 125 yards down that road, real stealth-like, and then I'd cut back over here, and I'd go up and climb up that ladder and be in my stand. I had a corn feeder sitting there. So that was my bow stand. My big tire stand, that was my rifle stand for rifle season. And when I parked my four-wheeler, I stealthed up there. And when I come around this way, I kind of brought my light around real low, and I could see a doe right there. She never blew, thank God, but she took off. I actually saw the doe. I saw her eye reflections, eye shine first, and I could see her in my light. She just took off. And so when I scanned all the way back to where my hunting stand is, up in that big pine tree, because that pine tree was about that big around. And when I scanned up here, I saw some eye shine up here. And it was like, every every feeling that I had when I was 12 years old kind of all of a sudden just jolted me. You know, it was like a bolt of electricity went through me. And my mind's trying to work out, no, that wasn't one. He's not that close. They're, you know, so I took my light and I scanned it about to the bottom of my feeder, because I don't like hitting them in the eyes with white light. You know, the red's a whole lot better. And when I come back around, I went a little bit higher, but not up to get him in the eyes. And when I scanned back, I'm like, oh, there he is. And he was tree peeking. You know, he was just right on the inside of the woods. And it was a big pine thicket up in there. He was just right on the other side, you know, just back in the woods where you couldn't see him, but I could see that eye shine around the tree, you know. And he had eyes about that big around, about that far apart, and he's tree peeking at me, and I'm just froze, you know, because all that stuff come back to me. I'm like, what do I do? You know, 125 yards back this way is the four-wheeler, but 20 yards this way is my lean-up stand. What do you do? You know, I've got my backpack on, so I was like, well, I can't outrun this sucker, so I'm going to take to the stand. So I just kind of walked, you know, had my light low, you know, still trying to catch a glimpse of the eye shine. And I got to my stand. Man, I've never climbed that ladder so fast. I got up in there and got all set up. Now, my stand, I've got it like totally camouflaged, head to toe. You know, the bottom of it where you put your feet, because a lot of time them deer will come up under you and they'll see you move your feet or something like that, and they'll jet out of there, especially a doe. And she blows, it's all over. The hunt's over. Just pack up and go home or go hit another stand. And so I had that bottom camouflaged. And I'm sitting up there, and I don't care if you're a Christian or not, when something like this happens and you get boogered up, you'll start praying. And I'm up there praying, and I pull out my Glock. It has a crimson tracer, and I've got it sitting here between my legs, pointing down, and I'm sitting here praying to God, let the sun come up. I said, now I read in the Bible where you made the sun go back. You made it stand still. I said, you can make the sun come up real fast. And I was praying, God, make the sun come up. Come on, make the sun protect me. Don't let him yank this, you know, yank this tree stand off the pine tree. And I'm sitting there just talking to God. And I can hear him stepping around right underneath me, and I'm 25 foot up in the air is what the bottom of it was. So I'm basically almost 30 feet in the air, and I'm sitting there with that pistol between my legs. You know, I hadn't turned on the laser just yet, you know, but I got between my legs, and I'm listening, and I'm praying in my head, and I could hear him, you know, stepping underneath. He went all the way around my stand. I heard him, you could hear him smell it, trying to sniff to catch my wind and stuff. And I guess he bumped the ladder. And when he bumped that ladder, man, I almost jumped out of that opening and hit the ground running. I mean, I was like, yep, this is it. I'm going to be a Bigfoot Happy Meal right here. It's all over for Dave. And, but the ladder come down like this, the tree's here, and there's two cables that go around the tree once and come back that you can attach to the ladder, and you can tighten them up. That keeps that ladder in place down there. And I mean, it's pretty tight. And I don't know if he took his hand and did that on the wire or what, but when he did that, man, and vibrated that thing, it come all the way up. That vibration come all the way up. And I'm sitting in there about to have a heart attack, you know, and praying. And as the sun come up, you know, he slowly just walked out, you know. And I'm like thanking God, thank you so much this sucker didn't eat me. And a lot of things go through your mind when you're in a tight spot and these critters are around. Because I was in a tight spot. Ain't no way I could jump out of this thing. So I come down my stand immediately after it departed, and looked around. Of course, there's so many pine needles on the ground. You could see imprints, but there was no way to cast a print because of the pine needles. And I'm like, well, that's, you know, but I went on back to town and was talking to my cousin, or went back to his house, started talking to my cousin. I said, man, I just saw a Bigfoot down there. He's like, what? I said, Matthew, there's a Bigfoot down there. And he's like, man, I've been hunting these woods since I was a kid. I said, he said, there ain't no Bigfoots down there. I said, man, there's Bigfoots down there. And then a couple of days after that incident happened, I saw my first encounter with what I would call a dog man. Okay, I had my first encounter with a dog man. And what I did is I took my four-wheeler up there and had this cage on the back, and I had 55-pound bags of corn in the back of it, and I'd back up to my feeder, pop the top, because my feeder's 8 foot off the ground at the top, and I'd filled it full of corn. And one thing that I left out of that encounter right there is my feeder's 8 foot tall. Now the eye shine that I saw was about 1.5 foot over my feeder. So that kind of gives you an idea of how tall this thing was. I called him Big Eddie, you know, because I had several encounters with him, and I'll get into that in a little bit.
What color was his eye shine?
Green.
Okay.
It was green, or kind of like a greenish yellow, you know, and it wasn't red. I've never seen a red-eyed one. There have always been, like, I've seen one that was blue-eyed. It had a blue shine to his eyes. But that kind of gives you an idea. But when I got my feeder filled up, I just was heading back to camp. And I saw this wolf come across the road. He was gray. Now, this old logging road is probably 20 foot wide. You got a big thicket right here, and you got the woods, kind of like these woods here, but a little bit thicker. And that sucker jetted across probably 75 yards, 60, 75 yards in front of me. I know what I saw. It wasn't a figment of my imagination. I know I saw the biggest gray wolf I had ever seen in my life. And I went ahead and rode down there and kind of looked to the side, and nothing. I mean, that sucker jetted up out of there. Matter of fact, he headed to my older brother's stand. And I went back and talked to Matthew. I said, man, y'all got any wolves down here? He said, man, ain't no wolves down here. I said, man, I just saw the biggest wolf. Are you sure you don't have wolves down there? But we found out that year was the worst year ever down there for deer hunting. I mean, all the deer were just gone. I mean, I think my brother killed a couple. I may have killed one, you know, but it was real scarce. And even the guy that, his name's Plug, that has the lease down in the bottoms where I've had most of my encounters, you know, he even told me, he said, man, I don't know what's wrong with the deer. He said, we ain't seeing no deer. I believe that between the Squatch and the dog man that I saw, you know, cleared all the deer out. Because we found a lot of dead critters. You know, we found a hog that had been ripped in half. Now imagine that. This hog was torn in two. The guts, head part was laying here, the bottom's laying here, guts strung out between the two of them, but this hog had been ripped in half. Can you imagine what it would take to rip a hog? Because this hog was probably about 150 pounds, and it was just ripped in half. And, but I told my cousin, I said, hey, you know, is there wolves down here? And he's like, man, there ain't no wolves. I said, man, I saw the biggest wolf I ever seen down there. And he's like, Dave, I don't know what you've been smoking, bro. Because he's a big kidder. And so I kind of settled that encounter. But down in the bottoms, I was up on this one lease here, and I'm on 3 leases down there now. But I wanted to get down in the bottoms on this bottom lease, so I ended up paying my dues and got down there. And I talked to Plug, and I said, man, you know, I went all through the woods, all over that place. And we've got the little Missouri River that runs through there that borders our whole camp area on one, our lease on one side. And that's about as close as I'll give you on that. But for the location wise, because I don't want nobody going down there and messing with these critters. And so that borderlines, and I wanted down there on that. So I went all over that lease. And every time I'd find a good place, all I had to do is stand there, kind of look around a little bit, and you'd find a tree stand, or you'd find, you know, a box stand somewhere, or a tree climber somewhere. So I went and talked to Plug, and I said, hey man, I said, everywhere I look, there's hunting stands. Where can I put a stand? He said, well, I know 2 good places. He said, there's one in the thicket over here. He took me over and showed me the thicket. And then he said, there's one over here on the beaver pond. And I said, well, the beaver pond sounds better. So I ended up putting one stand over in the beaver pond and put one in that thicket, and then put some cameras out. I got more hogs over here, but I had some pretty good bucks over here on the beaver pond. So I set up a stand. It was one of those little enclosed square hunting blinds is what it is. Zips up on one side, you step through, and it had this opening on the sides, just on two sides, that you could see through it. Not perfectly clear, but you could see through it. And it had these about where eye level was. It had these screens, that you could slide down, and it had like a two screen. It had one that just blocked it completely out, but you would slide those down and it'd leave a camouflage mesh to where you couldn't see any movement inside there, but you could see out perfectly, so the deer couldn't see you move. So I had that sucker down. I anchored that sucker down because I know it floods down there a lot. And I was sitting in there in that stand one morning is when I heard my first vocalizations down there. And when it started vocalizing, it was like engaging in that scream, because I've heard that vocalization a lot in the woods. And it was just like, and the more I thought about it, and it did long. And why I didn't pick up my phone and record this, I was just caught up in the moment, and when I go in the woods now, I put sound on automatically before I leave the truck. But it went down the side like this and then turned around, and I heard about 2 or 3 tree breaks when it got over in front of me across from the pond. Well, there's a trail. What I ascertained, there was a trail that ran through there. So the next day, I ended up getting boogered up, man. I ended up getting on my four-wheeler and getting out of there. I said, well, I'll just do this tomorrow. And so when I went down there the next day, I told my previous wife, I told her, I said, look, I'm going to go on, it was about noon, nothing happening, nothing coming in. I said, I'm going to go on a walkabout. If I ain't back in 2 hours, send a posse down here to search for me. So I went to go see where the vocalization was, where that path that he took. So I went over here to the side, and there's a creek running down through there, and I didn't even know it was behind me. The only place I'd been is the beaver pond. So I went over there and started following that down, and there's an old logging road that went down there. And I saw one place with a print, and I've got a picture of this. And I was like, man, I got to go down and get a closer picture. But it was like the hair on the back of my neck started standing up. There's a big thicket on the other side of this creek, and I'm coming out of the woods, and I'm just like, oh, no, I don't need to go down there. And my thinking was, this is, in my training, I was kind of looking around, assessing everything. It was like, this is an ambush spot. Don't go down there. And so what I did is I took my phone and brought it up real close and snapped a picture of that one print, some leaves and stuff, but you can tell it's a print. And I can share that with you. So I went on down, and when he come back up, there's a trail that runs through there. Now the tree breaks that I heard, what he did was about 12, 13 foot high. There was like 3 trees standing there. They were probably about that 6 inches like that. And what he done, he was popped the tops off these trees, and he put them in front of across the trail, setting up a barricade. I'm thinking, looking at that, I'm like, yeah, he don't want me down here is what the problem is. So I kind of go around, and I ended up leaving, and I ended up coming back hunting the next weekend. And when I went down there the next weekend, it started, there was a big storm moving in. But I love to hunt in the rain. I love to hunt when a storm comes in, that barometric pressure starts dropping, man, them deer will start moving, get pretty active. And so I'm down in my stand. This is hilarious. I'm down in my stand, but very scary. I was down in my stand, and you couldn't see anything. It was pitch black, but it was lightning constantly, thunder, boom, big thunder. And then lightning, I had my deal up, but I still had my screen up. And when the lightning flashes, it gives you that just brief second that it's daylight completely. You see everything, and then all of a sudden the lights go off once it stops crackling. And I'm sitting in my stand, and all of a sudden the hair on the back of my neck starts rising up. And I'm like, oh boy, when you continuously getting around these critters, I believe that your body starts sensing that they're around. And when they get close, man, I know when one's close, because the hair on my arms, on the back of my neck start raising up, and I'll have that uncomfortable feeling deep down inside. And that's what I was feeling. And I heard a stick pop behind me. Now I've got a little flap window that's directly behind me, and I'm in my hunting chair, kind of like this, and I'm sitting there, and I heard that stick pop, and I'm kind of like, I know, I just know there's one there. I just know one there. So what I did is I leaned over like this, over in my chair, and what I was trying to do is get right here in the corner to where I could see what was behind me. Now, mind you, it's pitch black, but it had a lot of lightning that morning, and so I was waiting on that lightning to strike. And I'm bent over, I got my rifle in my lap, and I'm bent over trying to look behind the stand, waiting on that lightning to strike. And then the lightning did strike, but when it struck, there he was. What I ascertained that he was standing, he was right behind me in that blind. And he leaned over like this because his hair was hanging down like that. I remember that. And it was just that brief flash. And I screamed and he screamed and I could hear him coming through the woods. But I was actually in stage left. I got up and I lunged forward to try to get out of my hunting blind, but I had that sucker tacked down pretty good and wore myself out trying to get out of that hunting blind to get away from that critter. And finally I just collapsed and just sat there, breathing hard. And I'm like, oh my God, but he was right there face to face. That's why I'm working on a book that hopefully it'll be out pretty soon. It's called Sasquatch in Your Face. And because of that encounter, he wasn't 12 inches from me. But I just saw him for that brief moment. Big black eyes. I didn't see any white in his eyes, but he had big black eyes, had his mouth shut. Now, this one didn't look human at all, but it didn't look like an ape as well. It looked more Neanderthalish because the ridge on his brow right here was real pronounced, which tells me that usually you can see it in humans. They'll have a big pronounced brow right here, and that tells me that there's a lot of growth hormone that's taking place. And I believe these things have that as well to get the size that these things are. I couldn't tell you how tall he was because he was bent over. I remember his hair down. He had his mouth closed. Now this one had a nose that was a little bit more flat than the one I saw when I was 12. And it wasn't, it wasn't out here like a monkey or a gorilla or anything like that, but it stuck out just a little bit. It was pronounced enough to see it in that flash of that moment because it was just a blink of the eye and he was there and then the light shut off. That what scared me because I didn't know, there's a little flap window behind me. He's standing right behind. He could have reached in there and grabbed me and yanked me plumb out of that little blind. But man, I tell you what, I wore myself out trying to get out of that blind because the door's back over here with a zipper. And I'm trying to get out of the side of this. And finally, I just collapsed and just sat there for a long time. And then finally, I got up, got on my four-wheeler. Needless to say, I didn't hunt that day. So that one was a crazy encounter there. And then I started going down there late at night, or I'd go down there in the evening, and I'd start fishing down there. And I'm on the little Missouri River. The wife I was married to then, our marriage was real rocky, so I spent more time on the lease. That was my getaway, my escape. I've always loved the woods. So I'd take my side-by-side and I'd take my dog Christian, and German Shepherd I had at that time, and I'd go down to the little Missouri River on what we call Chinaberry. And some of my dogs down there in the hunting lease, they'll know exactly where I'm talking about. And I would drive out on this big long gravel bar and I would park there and I'd start fishing downriver. And my first encounter down there, and I'd play Southern rock. I just turn it up. I had a Bluetooth speaker and I just turn up the music. I just sit down and fish. I mean, it was peaceful down there. Every once in a while you can see a bald eagle flying by, just beautiful in the bottoms. This one little spot there at Chinaberry. And the sun started going down, and so I was planning on fishing till I got tired and went home. I went back to camp because I had my RV parked at the camp, and I was sitting there, and then I heard a hoot owl. Well, no, first there was I noticed something fell out of the air and hit next to me in the water. and I just didn't really pay no never mind to it, but I did remember looking up, and I said, well, there ain't no trees. What's that? What's that all about? What was that? And I'm sitting there, and then another rock hit almost in the same area, and that's when I saw the water was only about that deep, and I could see two stones sitting down there, and what they were doing it was with incredible accuracy. They weren't throwing them, because there was a 15-foot embankment on this side and 15-foot embankment on this side, and the river's down low, so I'm down in a very bad spot. Not a comfortable spot to be in if you go into a fight, but what they were doing is they were taking them rocks and chunking them up over the tree, and with extreme accuracy, they was hitting almost in the same spot. Well, when the third rock happened, that's when my German Shepherd kind of raised up, and I saw the hair on from the tip of her nose, tip of her tail, man, that hair have come up like that. And I'm like, I know, I know he's there. And because I had that feeling again. And he grabbed a tree about like that and shook that thing like you would grab a bush or a limb and do like that. That whole tree shook like that. And I'm like, golly, and he's just up over the bank, back far enough that we can't see him. My dog went nuts over that. And I kind of pulled her in close, calmed her down a little bit. And then another hoot owl sounded. And then where this one was, he sounded like a hoot owl. But it sounded like, it was pretty close, but you could tell that there was something off with this hoot owl. They can mimic different sounds, different birds, different calls. They can sound like a crow, and all of a sudden I've got these three hoot owls over here, and I've got two hoot owls back over here, talking to each other, and I'm thinking, wow, so I get out my red light, and I'm kind of scan a little bit. I scanned back up over here, and I put my light back down, kept fishing like nothing was going on, music playing, everything's cool, But when I started scanning over here about the third time, and it's probably 10 o'clock at night, so it's already dark. And when I scanned over there, I caught the first eye shine, and I just kind of dropped the light and just kind of sat there a little bit, and I was like, okay, I know I've got one over my left shoulder. Now we got one to her about 2 o'clock. And so I just kept on doing what I was doing, just fishing. I'd reel my pole in, check my bait, throw it back out, and then I'd scan over here, and there's 3 sets of eye shine over here. Now, I know there's one here, but there's 3 sets of eye shine on the other side. And they were mimicking the hoot owls to communicate. And when I first heard this one, it was way off. Now they're right there. So this one hollered first. That's when this one come up. And then when it did the hoot owl, shook the tree and all that, spooked me too, but my German Shepherd. Then these started hooting, and they started coming in real close. So I've got 3 over here, I've got 1 over here, and then over to about my 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock over here, I can catch eye shine over here. I can hear this one up here walking around, and I can see the eye shine on that one. So I've got 5 of these rascals that are 15 foot high and about 15 foot high. So I'm in a dangerous spot. If they wanted to ambush me, they could ambush me. But something happened, and I really don't know what happened, but I know something did happen. And it's already pushing. They stayed there, I know, for a couple of hours. So we're pushing like 2 o'clock in the morning. I remember sitting in my chair, and I went to get up, and everything kind of went black. And when I woke up, we've got 2-3 hours that evidently I was down. Now, I wasn't sick, didn't have no queasy feeling or anything like that, but I went down, had mud caked on the side of my face. I'm laying there on the gravel bar and got mud caked on the side of my face. I got up, I packed up all my stuff, went all the way back to camp, took my fish, stuck it in the freezer that I cut, my catfish, stuck them in the freezer that I caught. And when I woke up the next morning, I was in bed. I woke up the next morning, it was about noon, 1 o'clock that evening. I never knew what happened. I remember getting up out of my chair, and that was it till I woke up the next morning. But I got up out of my chair, I packed up all my stuff, and drove all the way back to camp, never remembering anything that happened. I don't know if it was infrasound they hit me with, because been hit with infrasound about 3 different times. And the last 2 really made me sick, really made me quite dizzy, I almost fell over. And the strange part about it is the other 2 dudes I was doing research with, they didn't Justin, you know Justin, he's the first one that called you about and wanted me to share my story. But he was there and Steamboat was there. And they were throwing pine cones. I can hear them hitting the rocks, hitting the top of the RV and stuff. And they're like, man, you need to come out here, because I wasn't feeling good. I said, I'm going to go over here and lay down for a minute. And then hey, man, you need to come out here. And I come out there, I almost fell over. And I was like, guys, I don't know what's going on. But they hit me with infrasound. So 3 different times I've been hit with infrasound. And I don't remember packing up any of my fishing posts that night. I don't remember nothing until I woke up the next morning. I got up and went out to see if my dog was there, if my fishing stuff was there. Everything was packed up. I don't know what happened. The only thing I can ascertain that they hit me with infrasound. Now I went back down there. Of course, the river comes up and it goes back down during the evening. It comes up in the morning, goes back down because they're releasing the floodgates and stuff. Wasn't no tracks there or anything like that, And I was fishing a little bit further. There's 2 eyewitnesses that were with me on this. I was down there with my ex-wife, and me and my older brother were fishing, and she was down there with us, and she's like, I'm tired, I'm headed back to camp. And I've got pictures and videos of this I can show you. And so she got on my four-wheeler, because my brother had his side-by-side down there. She got on my four-wheeler and headed out. When she got to the main road, which is way, way down in the bottoms, about 5 miles down in the bottoms, and there's a dirt road that takes you down there. It's called Loop Road. And she found like tracks in the mud on one side of the road. And she hollers at me. Of course, cell phone service, I can't tell what she's saying or anything. Cell phone service is way bad down there until I got a hot spot. And she's telling me, finally I got out. She says, there are tracks down here in the road. I am coming, I'm headed back to RV. I ain't coming back down here anymore. That kind of made a believer out of her. But when me and my brother drove up there and found the tracks, they were probably 14 inches wide, 14 inches long, but the step was, I measured 50 inches from the tip of the toe to the next hill was 50 inches. And I've got video and pictures of all this. And it also made a believer out of my older brother. He's like, man, that's kind of strange. I was like, yeah, who's going to be down here, 10, 11 o'clock at night, walking barefooted with that size of foot out here in the middle of nowhere, because it looked like what it did was it come out of the bog and walked down one side of the road, which was real muddy, and then walked right back back up in the woods. And there was a trackway there, probably about 7 or 8 tracks that went through there. And I remember I didn't have anything to measure, but I put a business card down there for size on the size of the track. And then I come down there with a tape measure and started measuring. But and I wanted to cast those, but man, I was so tired. I said, surely nobody's going to drive down here. I'll be able to get a good track in the morning. So went to bed, got up early the next morning, went down there, and somebody had drove right down the middle of all those tracks. There's a lot of people go down that road to poach deer at night and whatnot, so I didn't get any tracks off that. But I do have some casted tracks. I should have brought them with me. But that's just a few instances. Now my new research area is down in southwest Arkansas. Now this new research area that I'm in is a triple hotspot. I've got one, I sent you that one video, that one coming down the tree and then spider crawling toward us. Man, that could have been $1 million shot. But the person I was with got freaked the smooth out. And they ran for the Jeep and jumped in the Jeep. They were like, F this, I'm getting in the Jeep. And because he was coming, spider crawling right toward us, and he had this big bushy type tree coming up, and all he had to do is come around. That would have been he was only 65 yards away. You know, if he would have come right around that, I'd have had a full shot on my thermal. Of course, the thermal I had wasn't all that great, so it's not real clear, but you can actually see the whole thing. Now the thermal I have now, I would love to have caught it on my thermal I have now because it's crystal clear. But when she done that and the lights come on, you know, her headlights come on, the interior lights come on, the brake lights shine, man, that sucker jetted and it was gone. You could hear it running through the water. I was so mad. I was so mad. I thought to myself, you know, everybody want to see a Bigfoot until the Bigfoot shows up. And then everybody dispersed. But on that hunting lease, I've had so many encounters, just different encounters. I remember that's the first, when I was down there, the first time I ever heard Sasquatch fight. You ever heard two of them fight?
When I was younger, yeah.
Yeah.
It was god awful.
Oh man, it's scared to fight. It sounds like two monsters, two King Kongs fighting. And what I did is I take glow sticks with me. And they really love glow sticks. Now, when I set out my sound traps now, what I do is I take somewhere within a 15, 20 foot perimeter, I'll hang a glow stick up when I set my sound traps out and then jet out of the area. And they'll come into those glow sticks. But I could see the eye shine probably 50, 60 yards from me. I could see the eye shine of two here doing the tree peeking, and I could see one over here in a heavily wooded area because I caught the eye shot. Didn't see the body, I just saw the eye shot. But over here, you can clearly see them, you know, peeking around the tree in their eye shine. And I had one of them glue sticks. Of course, I carry a pack of them now, and I popped that glue stick. I started shaking it, you know, and I was waving it around, you know, and they're sitting there, they're mesmerized by it. And I have a wrist rocket that I have in my pouch, my plate carrier that I carry. And I took that wrist rocket, I took that sucker and boom, flung it over there. Now you can see the eye shine. It's pitch black, probably 2 o'clock in the morning, but you can see that glow stick flying through the air. And when it hit the ground, it kind of just sat there for a minute. You can see the glow stick out there. All of a sudden the glow stick rises up in the air. And then all of a sudden, and the only thing I can ascertain is the two that were over here, one grabbed the glow stick and the other one wanted it. And man, they caused such a commotion out there. I mean, it was so loud. It sounded so brutal. These two fighting over a glow stick. So I carry glow sticks wherever I go now. Because that was, you know, like that. And I remember Big Eddie getting so close to me. Now he's only bluff charged me once. All the stuff that I had down there has been real docile, real peaceful. You know, you see them, you don't see them, real good. But once it was not last hunting season because I was all Bigfooting, but the year before when I was down there rifle hunting, I was down in my area on the 640, and you know, when I was squirrel hunting down there, you could always hear tree knocks or you could hear whistles, you know, that they would communicate back and forth. And, but I was down there, it was late at night, and, oh no, this was the bluff charge. I had my rifle, 7mm Magnum, got it slung over my deal. I got my Glock on my hip. And he come busting out of the brush, out of a thicket. And he was probably about 80 yards from me. And he came, I mean, the amount of time that it took him to cross that 80 yards and get to me was just like that. Incredible speed. And he got probably from here is that Silverado sitting right there. And have you ever seen a gorilla in the zoo, how they'll bluff charge the glass, you know, on all fours, you know, and come up there and hit the glass? It was kind of like that. He come at me on all fours, but it was like a sideways gallop is what it looked like. And he come up to me and he stopped and he took air. Of course, it was a lot of leaves and stuff like that, sticks and stuff, and just picked up 2 hands of sticks and stuff and threw leaves all over me. And I petrified. I froze and just stood there. And I kept remembering William Lunsford. He's another Bigfooter. He saw one of the Falk, Arkansas monster when he was a kid. I remember having conversations with him, and I said, "Man, I've got some that seem to be a little bit of on the aggressive side." And I remember him telling me, he said, "Dave," and this was a communication. I can't remember if we talked on the phone or it was through Messenger or something like that. And he said, "Always stand your ground. Always stand your ground." So when that sucker busted out, all I could hear was William Lunsford telling me in the back of my mind, "Always stand your ground. Always stand your ground." Because if you run, you invoke that predator instinct to chase. I have two German Shepherds and a cat named Sparkplug, and they're good around each other. I mean, they're real good. They pester the cat a little bit, but if she takes off running, them German Shepherds lose their mind and they take off running, getting that predator instinct. You run, I'm chasing. So I've got that going through my mind, because he told me if you run, they'll chase you. So I just stood there and allowed that to happen. But that scared the fire out of me. I mean, literally scared the fire out of me. But he ended up turning around and going back. The only thing I talked to a couple of other Bigfoot researchers. The only thing we could figure out, because that was the first time he ever showed any aggression. And the only thing we could figure is there may have been a new juvenile somewhere close to me, or I got too close to it to provoke. So I don't think that was on purpose. It was plumb accidental, but I provoked Big Eddie to bluff charge me. Now that was my fault. Wasn't him showing. I mean, he did show some aggression because he showed me his teeth and everything, but that was something that I did. Most of these encounters are peaceful. Now some of them aren't. Some of them can be very terrifying. That I've experienced myself. I remember one time I always carry a flare gun with me. Always. They don't like flares. I carry two flares, two 30-minute burn flares I carry with me on my plate, on my battle belt, and then I carry a flare gun with about 20 rounds of flares. And one time I got bluff charged, I pulled that flare gun out because I don't want to shoot one of these things. I don't want to have to kill a Bigfoot. The government already knows these things exist, so there ain't no sense putting one on the slab. We know that they exist. It's kind of like me and Miguel. It's kind of like the Bible, and our higher power, whatever people choose to call him. I call him God, and Lord, Jesus. But the Bible is written of eyewitness sightings to things that we weren't there. But yet, by faith, we believe that every word of this book is real. We believe by faith. I wasn't there when Jesus got crucified, but I believe by faith that he was crucified. We've got hundreds of historical records outside the Bible. In the Romans, Josephus, that points all the way back to Christ. Even the Romans in their history books, it said there was a man named Jesus and he was a worker of miracles and he was crucified. This is something outside the Bible. And we've got thousands, hundreds of thousands of different type of encounters people have had with these critters, And we've got video, we've got sound, we got documentation after documentation after documentation. And people still, people want you to kill one and parade it all the way around the United States to prove that it's real. You don't have to kill one to prove that these critters are real. They are real. I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I love my Jesus and I love my God, But a lot of people I'm finding out, are very uncomfortable with me being a Christian and the presence. I'm not a believer in Bigfoot. I'm a knower in Bigfoot. I'm not a believer in God. I'm not a believer in Jesus. I'm a follower. I'm a knower because I've experienced miracles. I've experienced his presence, just like with these things out here. Now, there's only been maybe a handful of times that they've ever showed aggression to me, but I'm not stupid. You know, when I go in the woods, I go heavy, you know, because of the bluff charge and some other things I'll tell you off camera. But, you know, most of them have been peaceful. But I always go in prepared. You know, I'm not stupid. God didn't raise no fool, you know. Just in case you got one that's grumpy. And it seems that in the southern part of the state, they seem to be a little bit more agitated than anywhere else, is what I've found in my research. Now, I could go on forever about my Bigfoot encounters. I've seen some in New Mexico when I was out there. I've seen some across the border, way down south. You know, it's just seemed wherever I went. You know, I was turkey hunting up in Cloudcroft, New Mexico, and I saw two out there. One I was turkey hunting, he grabbed my dang turkey and ran off with it. And another one, I was in the top of Little Dog Canyon. That's where I had a honey hole. It was a big old valley that run up through there, and I always killed a buck there. Every year I could kill it. I can guarantee you there'd be a buck in there, and I'd take it down. Matter of fact, the quickest I ever done was left the truck. 12 minutes later, I had a buck on the ground. So that was my honey hole. That's where I always went. This year I went, and there wasn't nothing was happening. I mean, there was no deer in that canyon, nowhere. So I start easing, crossing back and forth is how I usually go up these canyons, you know, because there's a lot. It's not forest like this. It's shorter trees, bushes. They're evergreen type bushes, but they're real thick, you know, but they're not very high, 7, 8 foot, something like that. So I started crisscrossing up through there, and I saw, now this one was big. This one was huge. The only thing I saw was the backside of it. Now his hair was perfect, shined in the sunlight, glimmered, but he was almost at the top of that canyon, and I seen him go up, and you could hear it because there's a lot of shell rock in this canyon. So when I heard that shell rock kicking, usually, you know, I'm looking for a deer. I was like, "Oop, there he is," you know, but it wasn't a deer, it was a Sasquatch, and he went right up over the top and then back down the other side. Now, I followed him up there and one up there. I mean, it's spread out for a long ways at the bottom of this canyon. I couldn't see that rascal nowhere. I mean, he made tracks. It was just amazing how fast he got up the side of that mountain. Now, that one was big and brute. He should have been an NFL player. You know, he was a Brutus for sure. I mean, he was real shiny, real long black hair, and he took over the one that stole my turkey when I was fixing to shoot it. He was black haired, real shiny, real pretty. There were pretty Sasquatches out there. Some of the main ones I've seen down here have been pretty scruffy looking, you know, being in the bottomland and stuff like that. But I'm real real encouraged by the new research area that I'm in. There's actually been I didn't catch the photographs, but Dole and Joe, they both caught photographs down there on some private land of a squatch. Beautiful pictures, kind of blurry, a little bit blurry, but he had and I'm telling this story, but and I'm gonna go to something after this. He had one of those 180 cameras, and I guess that camera, when it picks up something, it goes around and then pops the picture. So he's got a beautiful, of a red one, Sasquatch down there. And Dole, he has like an 18-inch print. This thing is huge, man. Big old print from a Bigfoot. But being down there, man, I have seen so much. And the thing about it is, I've only just barely touched the tip of the spear on this new research area. So I'm pretty stoked about that. We're going to have some expeditions down there in April. If you want to, anybody want to get it on one, all they got to do is email us at a.k.a.sasquatch@outlook.com, and we can get them the information on what it's going to take to get on some expeditions. You know, you can't never guarantee anybody a sighting, but I can guarantee people this: I'm going to put you in a hot spot to where there's been pictures, there's been cats, there's been vocalization, there have been tree knocks, you know, everything. It's a hot spot down there. And so I'm looking really forward to that. We got, I don't know, probably 8 or 10 places that I'm speaking at this year. And it all started with you, bro.
Yeah.
It started with Justin coming in and me telling him a few stories. And then he's like, man, you got to tell your story. You got to tell your story. You got to tell your story. And I'm like, I said, man, I got so much ridiculed, man. I can't, I'm not going to go public. He just kept after me and kept after me. Then I guess he had a conversation with you and you started talking to me. Come on, man, I need you on the channel. I need you on the channel. And the first time I went public when my sightings was with you. And that's where it started. And man, it's just like in this new season in my life, it's just like this thing has exploded. They're starting to call me the Bigfoot preacher now because some of the gigs that we're doing, I call them gigs, I've been able to go in and share my stories, set up a vendor booth, stuff like that. They're actually having church services at the end of these Bigfoot, what are they called? Bigfoot conferences. So I'm actually being able to, not only talk about something that I love, which is, in having encounters with these critters, but also I can talk to them freely about God as well, and the Bigfoot community needs to hear about Jesus. The paranormal community needs to hear about Jesus. Everybody needs Jesus. I mean, it's not a good world we live in anymore. And I tell people like this, that it's a powder keg and the fuse is already lit. We just don't know how long the fuse is. Look what happened yesterday morning. We just finally got into it with Iran. Where could this lead? So what I'm saying this, that it's time to get ready. It's time to prepare. Not only will I tell you about Bigfoot, but I'll tell you about eternity. There's a heaven, there's a hell. And it's up to you which one, because you've got eternal life. But it's up to you here, now, while we're breathing on this planet, that we have a choice. We can either surrender our lives to Christ, believe in faith that that crucifixion was for our sins, or we can split the gates of hell wide open. And that's just about as simple. You're going up or you're going down, that's it. So I'm excited about everything that's taking place now, and it all started with you. I mean, after your podcast, we did that phone interview, people started calling, wanting me to share on podcasts and stuff like that. So we've done a lot of podcasting and stuff like that. And I don't mind telling my Bigfoot stories now. I don't care what people think.
Took a big weight off your shoulders.
Oh, yeah.
And opened up new doorways.
To finally get all of that, because you can't tell nobody. I mean, I got ridiculed when I was a kid when I started telling them about my Bigfoot encounter. So it told me to just shut my mouth about my Bigfoot encounters. And it was through Justin and you that I finally, a year ago, thereabouts, I think it was the first part of last year, that in the spring, that we had that phone interview, and it's just like everything blossomed and just started taking place. And it's a new season in my life. I can tell people about Bigfoot, I can tell people about God.
Yeah, it's a good combo, and it's good to live in truth, because when you tell people, they're like, so is there just one Bigfoot out there? You think
no.
Bigfoot exists? How come no one shot one?
Right.
Well, where's the photos? Where's the tracks? Where's the body? And
look on YouTube. There's.
I know, and all that stuff is out there. So
right.
Once you just talk about it, especially with believers, it'll take you a long ways, because if you live in isolation, ball it up inside,
Right.
it's not good for you.
Yeah.
And talking to skeptics doesn't help.
Yeah, when I talked to you on the phone, it was like a big weight was lifted off of me, because I've kept so much so secret for so long about these critters. They're flesh and blood. Now, whether, I know there's a big argument where they come from, I really don't care. But I do know this. If we say God is in control, these critters had to come across his desk first to be here. Whether they're good, bad, ugly, whatever. Some of them are pretty ugly looking.
Yeah.
They're not very attractive, that's for sure.
Right.
But, they had to come across God's desk first to be here.
Yeah.
So
Everything's part of the plan. That one that bluff charged you, you said it was kind of moving to the side.
Yeah.
What did that one look like?
Big Eddie, that's the one I've had more encounters with him than any of them. Now he has, usually he has matted type hair. A lot of course, it's down in the bottoms down there. There's a lot of mud, and that mud lasts forever. You know, you sink in that mud, you'll go forever. So he was like real muddy from the about waist down, and then probably on the back of his shoulders here, because his shoulders, the hair usually that hangs down was pretty caked up. So he must have been like an old hog rolling around in the mud, you know. And I believe that's the way they control parasites and stuff like that, or even control their sin for that fact. But when he come charging in, bluff charging sideways, he had an ugly look on his face. I mean, he was pissed, you know, and this is the first time he was ever aggressive. You know, his eyes big, black, same with the buck teeth. You know, some people say they see fangs. I've never saw fangs, not on him, not on
He
Big
didn't have
A.
any canines?
Huh?
He didn't have any canines? Like, he
No.
had the block teeth, but no canines? Okay.
No canines that I could see whatsoever. It was just, and mainly what I see is the upper teeth. Very seldom do I see the bottom row of teeth, but it looked like just like big buck teeth like a horse. That's the best way I can explain it, but I know it scared the crap out of me. You know, he's probably close to 10 and a half, 11 feet, because he's grown some, because I saw him first, that that feeder was 8 foot off the ground, and he was at least 1.5 foot above my feeder. So that would probably put him 9.5. But he's taller than that now, and filled out. Man, he's getting broad. I mean, he's buff. He's real buff. But him coming across there, you know, it was so strange with him kind of galloping. It's kind of like. Have you ever seen a puppy walk in her hind end? It's kind of over here like this, and that what we call is puppy tracking. You know, or if you ride behind a diesel truck or just a regular truck, and the front end's here, but the rear end's a little bit cocked. You know, it's puppy trailing is what we call it. So his butt, he was on not you know, hands and feet like that. He was sideways, coming at me. I mean, in covered ground. His butt was low to the ground, he looked just like a gorilla at the zoo, coming at me. Dark, fast, you know. I nearly wet myself on that one.
Yeah. So you've had experiences your entire life, and you even had encounters in New Mexico, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned it earlier in the interview that you believe that you can be marked by these creatures. Do you believe that you're marked, and why do you think that is?
You know, I think it's this. I believe, you know, these critters they're more smarter than we are. You know, they might not write, but they have their own language, their own way of communicating. So they're very, very intelligent creatures, very intelligent. I believe that they do have, like elephants, like dolphins, whales, have that infrasound that can affect a person like it did me on 3 different occasions. How they're so elusive, you know, and I believe they can see things that I believe humans possessed way back. You know, we're so much concrete, so much distraction, you know. I believe way back that humans were more, and their senses were different. It's like we've been dulled down, where these critters haven't. You know, with all the stuff that we have today, yeah, it's smart, yeah, it's cool, and all that kind of stuff, but we miss it. You know, when's the last time somebody sat down and just listened to the wind blow through the leaves or blow through the trees? And I believe that, you know, every person, it's scientifically proven, every person has a aura around them. I don't know how all that is, but we put off an energy. And I believe these things can pick up on that energy, or maybe see the aura that we put off. And they can distinguish us from good or bad. You know, I've been threatened by them, but I've never been a threat to them. Most of them. But I believe they see that aura, and that's the reason so many people don't see them. I believe they don't have a good aura about them. They're not good-hearted, you know, kind-hearted, you know, and I believe they can see that. And I believe when people, especially when they're small, and they see one of these, it's just like an attractant, you know. Being down on my hunting lease, you know, nobody ever saw anything until I showed up. And then I see the stuff all over the place. You know, they believe now, skeptically. I said, well, you'll have your encounter. Just give it some time, you know. But I believe they can see our aura and sense the goodness that we have in it, or the badness that we have in it as well. And I believe they can pick up on that. And through that, I believe that, you know, not only just one possesses, but all that race of these critters possess that ability to look at a human and tell if they're good or bad.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So I believe that, you know, they do tag people, certain people in this world, to
Yeah.
where you see them
I've experienced
all
it.
over the place.
Like, it didn't matter what conservation area I'd go to, they would be there.
They're
It got
there.
to the point where I felt like every hunter knows about them, they just don't talk about them. And that wasn't the case. Like, I know well-seasoned, experienced hunters, and like, you ever had a Bigfoot encounter? Like, you know, one eyebrow raised, like,
Right.
what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
But yeah, it still boggles my mind, but it's nice speaking with people who understand and have had the same experiences.
Right.
Like, we never met until the podcast, and
Right.
a lot of our encounters and experiences line up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think it has something to do with the Nephilim? Do you just feel like it's some ancient Neanderthal, an unknown primate species? What's your theory about this?
Man, what they evolved from, I haven't the slightest idea. And here's all we can do. You know, I see a lot of people out there with the tag Bigfoot expert. You know, it kind of makes me chuckle a little bit. And I'm not disrespecting them any at all, but all we can do really is speculate about these critters. You know, and there's big debates. You know, are they the descendants of Cain? You know, and Esau, he was a hairy man, and how they try to get out of God's word. You know, are they a spinoff from the Nephilim? You know, all of these are very important theories, but that's all they are, is speculations. You know, my take on them, I believe there are people who have their own sect, their own clans. You know, a lot of their behavior reminds me of the indigenous people that were here before we ever got here and screwed everything up. You know, I've seen them make stuff, you know, at my gifting spot. You know, they brought me, I think I got about 7 arrowheads that they gifted me with. The last time I went out, what was it, a week ago? I was down in Falk and got my camp set up. And the next morning I found behind my truck, there was a glass marble about that big around laying on the ground. Now I'd walked by there unloading stuff, camping stuff out of my truck. I know there wasn't no marble there, but the next morning there was a marble there. That was a gift. That was a gift. You know, I've got a stick, a club that they left at the gifting spot, you know, little trinkets, you know, and I've heard of some people getting like little dolls made, or certain kind of wreaths, or they'll set stones in a certain pattern or dimension or something, and they'll move them around, you know, or place them a different way or something like that, you know. But, you know, as a Neanderthal man, I would probably be more likely to believe that it's something like, because if you really go back in our history as a world, not just as a country, But as a world, you know, you have stories of Neanderthal type people. You know, we first ones that lived on this planet. I'm not even going to get into that. Don't send me no emails on it. I'm not going to discuss it. But you had the human race and you had Neanderthal. Now, while all this is going on in the outside, you've got this big circle over here where Adam and Eve is. Now, this can be proven if you dig deep enough. It can be proven. I think it's more than Neanderthal. To me, that's just my personal opinion. My personal opinion don't mount to a hill of beans, but they have more Neanderthal looks, demeanor. You see. Now, I'm not saying that that was part of the us getting here. We began with Adam and Eve, but there was things going on outside here that people don't know about. But you got to get into the whole 88 books of the Bible, not just the 66 that we have. So I would swing with the Neanderthal. I just think they're an ancient race that has been here forever. And they're still surviving as much as we're pushing them out of their habitat, destroying their habitat to put up apartment buildings or put up a strip mall. I thank God that we have places like this that are protected, for these critters to call home. It's kind of like down there where my research is area. If I'm not mistaken, there's 90,000 acres out there of protected land, and I've been told that there's places that no human has ever stepped in. I want to find those places. Of course, it takes a boat to get there. And it takes money to research. Research costs money. It's just kind of like out preaching. That costs money to be able to do these things. It costs money, and there's a money into it. I have a business. We try to raise money for new equipment, for drone. I need a drone, and I need a big parabolic mic like you have. I'd love to have one of those. We finally got a boat. It's kind of we're still in negotiations over that, but I need a bigger motor for it because his motor played out.
Yeah, it takes a lot of resources,
A lot of
time and money to do
resources
this.
to be able to do this. And I still have a full-time job. The only cool thing is right now, I'm not married anymore, so I can go where I want anytime I want and not have to ask anybody's permission if it's okay or not, So my extra time, I'm always out in the woods looking for these things. And it doesn't matter where I go, I can start picking up on, wherever they have been,